everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Christy. I am so excited. We have our dear, dear soul sister and friend Karina with us from Magic of the Moon Astrology. I got a new chair, you guys. I'm so excited. It is a little squeaky, so if you hear a little squeak squeak, it's just because I'm excited and I'm moving around in my chair, but I'm not sitting on a metal step stool anymore, so yay. Karina, how have you been?
Oh, 2024, astrologically, I knew it was going to be a little bit of a roller coaster.
Right?
And I had a very wise friend, an Akashic Records reader, tell me at the beginning of the year, she was like, roller coasters are only scary if you resist the change. But if you kind of lean into it and roll with it, roller coasters can be fun. And I was like, I think that's how I'm going to approach 2024. It's a roller coaster, and I am just going to roll with it. And I think that has been very helpful. So yeah, it's. I feel like life has been a little bit of a roller coaster, but yeah, leaning into the turns, whatever life brings.
Yes. Now I wanted to ask you, can you see and hear me okay? Am I good?
You're a little bit pixelated, but I can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
And sometimes you're super clear, your image.
Okay. Well, we're just going to go with it because my phone data is being weird, so I'm just going to have to be on Wi-Fi. So bear with me, you guys. If I'm pixely, I'm sorry. If I cut out, I'll pause and then, redo everything. So, Karina, I am so excited about this conversation tonight because so many people have asked me questions about fixed, cardinal, and mutable signs, and I know just enough to be dangerous. So I was like, we're bringing in the experts, right? So we want to learn all about, I want to learn all about what that means, because I know for me, my sun sign is Aquarius, which is fixed, but my Cancer sign is cardinal. Is that right?
Cardinal.
And so I know you're going to answer this for us, but how does that all work together? What does that look like? Like, what do they mean? So I'm super excited. So go ahead and
I love it.
share away with us.
Okay. So this is a topic that I am particularly passionate about, and it's because so much of astrology, there's some physical component, okay, the sun, we all can see the sun. Mercury, yes, that's a planet. Even the elements, earth, fire, air, water. We're all kind of like, yep, I get that. Earth, fire, yeah, I get that. But what are called the modes, cardinal, fixed, and mutable in astrology, somehow they kind of, there is a physical component to them, but almost nobody learns how to connect that up to anything physical. So they stay very esoteric. So it's a topic I love to talk about and kind of bring a little illumination, because it colors so much of our understanding about our own signs, sun, moon, rising, to understand this. So if we forget about astrology for a moment and we picture ourselves back in ancient times, people actually were still looking at the sky and looking at constellations and figuring out astrology in ancient times, but we're just not going to think about that right now. We're just going to talk about these people eking a living out of the land, either through being hunter-gatherers, maybe early agriculture. Seasons were incredibly, incredibly important to these people. In our modern world, we can turn on the air conditioning, or we can turn on the heater, or we can artificially turn on the hose and water our garden. But for ancient people, they didn't have that. And there were whole festivals and celebrations designed around different, the start of different seasons. Like in ancient Egypt, for example, there was huge rejoicing when the banks of the Nile flooded in the spring, because that was basically like, hey, we've got lots of water. Things are going to grow. Our dry time is ending.
Right.
And if you look at further north, where we have kind of the standard spring, summer, fall, winter, those seasons were very important. When agriculture started, that determined whether you were sowing seeds or whether you were harvesting. You knew you had to
Right.
harvest and save enough for a long, cold winter. So
Mm-hmm.
seasons were incredibly important to more ancient people. And
Mm-hmm.
and you don't even have to go back to ancient times. There are farmers right now who still care
Yeah.
a lot about seasons, and who, it's still very important whether we're getting rain this week or not.
Right.
So,
Right.
but it was even more important in those days because there wasn't artificial irrigation and things like that. So the
Mm-hmm.
seasons marked these important points for people. And there were huge supplications made to the gods of each of the cultures. Hey, bring us a good rain in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
bring us a good harvest.
Right.
And
Right.
really, when it comes down to it, the modes of cardinal, fixed, and mutable are exactly oriented around seasons, which
Oh.
it feels more esoteric now because we are less in touch with seasons. But in
Mm-hmm.
ancient times, those were super, super important. So
Okay.
a lot of astrology was kind of developed in the Northern Hemisphere, where there tended to be four discrete seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And each of the, maybe I'll take one step towards astrology, since we do need to connect to that in at some point.
Right.
We know that the solstices represent the
Mm-hmm.
shortest and longest days of the year, and we just
Mm-hmm.
had our summer solstice.
Right.
That
Right.
day had the biggest number of hours of daylight, and the smallest number of hours of nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
And in December, we get the winter solstice, and that's totally reversed. In And then we get the equinoxes where the day and night are equal length, and we have
Mm-hmm.
two of those. One at the
Mm-hmm.
start of Aries season, one at the start of Libra season. So
Okay.
the solstices and the equinoxes correlate with the starts of the seasons.
Oh, okay.
So Aries, which is the start of the zodiac, occurs during the spring equinox. So at that moment where there's an exactly equal amount of day and night, that is when Aries season starts.
Interesting.
Likewise, opposite Aries is Libra. I
Uh-huh.
promise this is all going to come back to cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I promise
Right,
we're going to
right.
get there. We're laying all of the seasonal groundwork.
Right,
All of
right,
the
right.
seasonal groundwork. So opposite Aries, Libra. Libra season starts during the equinox on the other side, where the days are getting shorter, but
Mm-hmm.
they are, the daylight and nighttime have the same number of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then our solstices, those are the starts of Cancer and Capricorn. So we just had the summer solstice. So we went from
Mm-hmm.
Gemini to Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take one step back so we don't get too esoteric. If we look at the zodiac as a wheel,
Mm-hmm.
and Aries starts the zodiac, I think most of us are
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that,
Right.
and we go 1/4 of the way around the zodiac, we get to Cancer. We go
Mm-hmm.
another quarter, we get to Libra. We go another quarter, we get to Capricorn. We go
Mm-hmm.
another quarter, and we're back to Aries.
Mm-hmm.
So the division of the zodiac into 4 equal quarters,
Mm-hmm.
the solstice and equinox times divide that.
Oh, I never realized that.
And I'm just looking because it seems like we're a
Yeah.
couple. Okay, it seems like comments more. And please feel free to ask
Right.
questions because this is sort
Yes.
of the foundational part people struggle a little bit with. But once we get this, cardinal, fixed, and mutable are just going to come along for the ride and be super
Right.
easy, and you're never going to forget them again. So we basically have the solstices and the equinoxes that divide the year or the
Mm-hmm.
zodiac, because the
Mm-hmm.
sun moves through the zodiac once per year, divides that into
Mm-hmm.
4 equal parts.
Mm-hmm.
that basically sets how we define our seasons.
Okay.
And this is true. If you look at the first, the first day of summer, the first day of spring, the first day of fall on your calendar, that corresponds with the equinoxes and the solstices. So the Aries equinox is the start of spring. The Cancer summer solstice is the start of summer. Libra equinox is the start of fall. And Capricorn solstice is the start of winter. So we basically have and of course, depending on where you live in the world, that doesn't actually correspond exactly. Like, it's not like exactly on, exactly when Aries season starts, all of the little flowers spring out of the ground and start growing. And likewise, for a lot of us, snow and winter might start quite a bit before December 21st, which is about when, winter starts. But that is how we've kind of chosen to divide up our year into these 4 equal seasons.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly, Shannon. Dividing seasons. That is exactly what these were meant to do, is kind of divide into the different seasons. Equator, it is all the same. That is I'm debating if we want to get into that right now, Shannon, or if we want to go into a separate. The short answer is the concept is still the same no matter where you are. Even if you're at the equator, the concept is still the same. And even if you're at the equator, you do still have seasons because the earth is not, you know what? The earth is tilted on its axis. We won't go too far into that. The short answer, Shannon, is it still applies at the equator. And the equator does have seasons. It just tends to be more of a rainy season and a dry season. But this is most visible and makes the most sense when you consider kind of the more European farming communities where some of this was developed. And even if you look at quite a bit of the Mediterranean region, which tends to be drier and wetter now, but used to, as climate stuff has happened, it's become more of a dual season, but it started as more of a 4 season. So yeah, the whole equator though, there's super interesting stuff. We could get into that another time. The whole astrology, ecliptic, and zodiac set of constellations is all related to that, but we will put that in a different bucket for now. Right now, we will say, you know what? We have 4 seasons, and we have decided that each one of them is going to be equal length. And when the daylight is shortest and longest, and when the day and night are equal length, those are going to be the 4 points where we divide our seasons. Okay. And our 4 seasons are spring, summer, fall, winter. Right. So far, so good.
Yes. I think everybody's doing good.
And okay, cool. And Shannon, you said Ecuador. I thought you meant equator. So equator is, something else we could talk about. For Ecuador, for Southern Hemisphere, this exact same concept applies, but rather than Aries being the start of spring, it's the start of fall in the Southern Hemisphere. So all of the seasons are kind of flipped, but there are still 4. Okay. And yes, Shannon, solstice is greatest daylight or greatest night, and the equinox, just like the word equal, day and night have equal length. Okay. We have made it through the hard part, everybody. We have made it through the difficult part.
Yay!
Now, for each one of these seasons, the idea was a switch does not flip overnight. It's not like you go from, oh, it's autumn, look at all of the orange leaves. And then the next day a switch flips and all of a sudden it's snowy and we're all making snowmen and snow women. That is not how it works. So the
Right.
idea
Right.
was for each one of the seasons, there's kind of a ramping down of the old
Hmm.
season and a ramping up of the new season, which I think, of course, it makes sense because we typically don't have weather that, changes in this really, overnight way.
Defined. Yes.
But yeah, but even we've talked about herbalism on your
Hmm.
podcast in the past, Christy,
Hmm.
and so much of even older medicine and
Hmm.
herbalism was oriented around this concept that you would kind of ramp down on hot
Hmm.
weather and you would start taking herbs to help with cold and chills and fever and some of the diseases that were more prevalent during the winter. And
Hmm.
so and there are whole herbs that are kind of um, dedicated towards particular seasons to help you with the difficulties of that season. So, like
Oh,
nettles,
wow.
for example, is a
Right.
great spring remedy.
Hmm.
Nettles has tons of minerals and it's
Hmm.
very nutritive. And
Hmm.
coming out of winter, where people are
Hmm.
just eating whatever they've been able to store up, over the winter and their reserves are running low, typically their
Hmm.
mineral levels were running really low. And so nettles was a
Right.
great herb to kind of transition into the spring, take advantage of, the new growth and
Hmm.
fertility of the earth.
Right.
So older peoples had this idea of transitioning with the seasons and eating and living in a way that was congruent and helpful
Hmm.
with that season. Whereas
Right.
again, in modern times we can go to the grocery store and buy an orange, and it can be winter and it can be
Hmm.
summer, and
Hmm.
a lot of times we aren't even aware of what eating seasonally would look like because we can get things shipped from all over the world and buy
Right.
something totally out of season or something that doesn't even natively grow in our area of the world.
Hmm. Hmm.
So again, these ancient people were kind of putting ourselves in their mindset. They cared a lot about the seasons.
Hmm.
It brought a whole set of different plants. It brought a whole set of different responsibilities. Like maybe you are sowing your field in the spring and you are harvesting it in the fall. So they
Right.
really cared about living with the seasons and
Hmm.
ramping down on each season and then ramp up on the next one. So there's always been this concept in cultures. Really, I think probably almost every culture has this concept of kind of
Hmm.
a creator, a preserver, and a destroyer. So if anyone is familiar with like Hindu beliefs, for example, they have Brahma as the creator, Vishnu as the preserver or sustainer, Shiva as the destroyer or regenerator. But so many cultures have this concept if you have to bring
Right.
something up, then you
Hmm.
have to hold it and keep it going and maintain it. And then you have
Hmm.
to wind it down in preparation for
Hmm.
something else. And
Hmm.
even,
Hmm.
the reincarnative cycle ideas are based around this that you're born, you kind of
Hmm.
exist and maintain in the world, and then you
Hmm.
die in preparation to be reborn, as something else.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, this concept of spinning something up, creating something, holding it and preserving it, and then
Hmm.
spinning it down,
Hmm.
is this idea that's it's so beautiful, but it's so cross-cultural. So
Right.
many cultures have a concept of this. So
Right.
this then was baked into the seasonal idea, where each season has sort of this beginning, spin it
Hmm.
up, like
Right.
create something new
Hmm.
from raw materials.
Hmm.
It has a
Hmm.
concept of preserving it, maintaining it, and it has a concept of, okay, it's time for this to spin down and die so that something
Right.
else can rise up. And that we're finally back around to the modes, the cardinal,
Right.
fixed, and mutable. So each season, we talked about how there are four equal
Hmm.
quarters of the zodiac and of the year, and each
Hmm.
one of them corresponds to a season, what we have called a season. Each
Hmm.
one of those seasons has three zodiac signs within it. Four seasons, three zodiac signs each, 12 zodiac signs total. So each
Oh.
one of the seasons has a spin it up, create it energy,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
hold it, maintain it, keep it fixed
Mm-hmm.
energy, and a
Mm-hmm.
spin it down. It's time for something else. So we got to close this out
Right.
energy.
Okay. Okay.
And this is what each of the zodiac modes represent. So every season starts with a cardinal sign. The cardinal energy, the root of the word cardinal kind of means original first. I feel like most of us tend to think of the red bird when we think of
Mm-hmm.
cardinal, which is a
Yeah.
beautiful bird. But
Right.
cardinal
Right.
is also a mathematical term that does mean more like an initiatory numbering system. So there's this sense of
Okay.
you're starting it, you're bringing it up, you're creating it.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the cardinal signs. And we have Aries that starts the spring season, Cancer, which just last week started our summer season,
Uh-huh.
Libra, which starts the autumn season, and Capricorn, which starts the winter season. And each one of those is a different element. So we have cardinal fire, Aries, cardinal water,
Mm-hmm.
Cancer, cardinal air, Libra, cardinal earth, Capricorn. Okay, so how is everybody doing so far? Are we along for the ride? Any
I
confusion areas before
Yes,
I go
no,
further?
no, no. That makes perfect sense. I understand why you had to kind of explain the seasons, and I like how you said spin it up, maintain it, and then wind it down. And that really helps to understand that energy. Not only in people, are you someone who spins it up? Are you someone who maintains it? Are you someone who winds it down? And we all
Exactly.
have those aspects of us. Um, and yes, then Capricorn is Earth. It is
Yes,
Earth.
it is. And that's what's so cool too about these modes is we have that
Mhm.
energy of spinning it up, we have that energy of
Yeah.
maintaining it, we have that energy of
Mhm.
spinning it down, and each one of those we have with each element. So
Mhm.
we have a
Mhm.
spin it up fire, we have a
Mhm.
maintaining fire, and we have a spin
Mhm.
it down fire. And we have that for each of the elements.
Nice.
So you can
Nice.
kind of start to think about what does it look like to spin something up from a fire
Mhm.
perspective? That's Aries energy.
Right. Right.
What does
Right.
it look
Right.
like to spin something up and create it from a watery perspective? That's
Mhm.
Cancer. And so you can kind of start to see so many people, when they start out with astrology, try to memorize things. They try to memorize a
Mhm.
list of here's what Capricorn is, here's what Leo is,
Right.
here's what Cancer
Mhm.
is. But if you
Right.
kind of learn the elements and the modes,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
can really just guess. You can really
Yeah.
just guess, and you don't have to memorize because you're kind of understanding the archetypes behind all of this. So if we
Right.
think about like, let's just pick an example. Shannon mentioned Sagittarius, so we're just going to use
Mhm.
Sagittarius. You know, this energy of kind of spinning down and destroying, what
Mhm.
does that look like from a fire
Mhm.
sense?
Mhm.
My mind goes towards like wildfires, forest fires,
Right.
you
Right.
know, like the beginning ember when you just want to get a campfire started. That's kind of
Mhm.
Aries, where you're going from no fire, nothing at all, just a pile of dead wood, to an actual
Mhm.
fire. That's Aries.
Mhm.
But that
Right.
energy of kind of spinning things down, that
Mhm.
mutable energy of
Mhm.
Sagittarius, that feels more
Mhm.
like a forest fire.
Mhm.
Now, fire in any form can obviously be deadly. Fire is a strong, passionate, full of
Right.
energy element.
Right.
But you
Right.
know, actually, like forest fires are an important ecological part of of forests. Otherwise, you
Right.
tend to get
Right.
overgrowth, and you have stunted trees that can't grow because there are too
Mhm.
many trees.
Mhm.
And so that forest fire energy, if we're thinking about spinning things down in a fire way, in a Sagittarius way, you know, I kind of feel like, okay, there's all these ideas,
Right.
just like all these little trees in a forest. and a
Mm-hmm.
fire is going to come through, and only the best and strongest ones are going to sort of
Mm-hmm.
survive to the next season. It's going to prune. It's going to
Right.
burn
Right.
away what
Mm-hmm.
isn't, it isn't a good enough idea to kind of keep it
Right.
alive, keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
So I find
Mm-hmm.
that Sagittarius really can consolidate ideas down.
Mm-hmm.
Aries has a million ideas and probably starts 50% of
Right.
them, but gets stuck
Right.
halfway because they don't have that
Right.
energy to keep it going or finish it. Whereas
Right. Right.
Sagittarius can do more of the, okay, what's most important?
Mm-hmm.
Prune out the rest. So that's
Right.
what, mutable finishing up energy might look like from
Mm-hmm.
a fire
Mm-hmm.
perspective. But almost all of these, if you think about it from a nature perspective, like, yeah, what does fire ending things look like? To
Yeah.
me, that feels like forest fire energy.
Yes.
But
Well,
there's almost always a nature equivalent we can draw.
and I like to refer it to people. I love how you tie it back to nature, but also for me, I find it helpful when I'm learning this or I'm thinking of something. When you mention Aries, I think of my brother. He's an Aries.
Yes.
And so I think of what are his traits. Both positive, both healthy and unhealthy traits. So that it makes sense for me. It helps me to relate to people. But your example of a forest fire is really good too, because you do have to have, and there are some of the benefits too are that not only that the strong survive, but you get those nutrients in the ground, like you said, that you need for those
Yeah.
seeds to really take root and grow. So I think it's beautiful because it does, when you look at it, it's one of those things, astrology, kind of the more esoteric spiritual path, you kind of are like, oh, I don't get it. And when you really break it down to a human level, or, like you said, a
Mm.
nature level, something you can understand, it takes a lot of that confusion away. Um, yeah, Shannon. So I grew up in a house with two Geminis. My mom was a Gemini. My dad was a Gemini. My brother was an Aries, and I was an Aquarius. It was
Lot of
volatile.
air there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing too that helps me with that might help you guys. I think of, what does air and fire together look like? Well, it can fan a flame and it can really get out of
Mm.
control, or like
Yes.
you said, it can sustain it. What
Yeah.
does water and fire look like? Well, you can completely put it out. You can drown it, or you can create steam and you can go somewhere, a steam engine, or you can give yourself a
Yes.
steam burn. So I mean, I kind of try, and when I look at things, I look at it through that level. So you have both the healthy and the unhealthy sides of it. So it can be
Mhm.
good, and it can also have that unhealthy. My ex-husband was an Aries. I was an Aquarius. It did not work, y'all. Like, we fanned those flames, and so again, it depends on a lot more than that. But that might be that might be something helpful to someone
Mm.
else. So Ben asked if that's how they
Yeah.
got compatible signs. Let me see if I can go back to
Two of
that.
the big factors, Ben, that go into determining astrological compatibility are exactly that, the elements and the
Mhm.
modes. And they view it, if you have the same mode, that's more compatible because you're approaching things the same way. And if you have the same element, that's more
Mhm.
compatible because fire understands fire, air understands air.
Right.
Now, obviously, the compatibility things are pretty oversimplified. Um,
Mhm.
because we have whole charts. It's not like Christy is just an Aquarius. Christy also has a Cancer moon. Christy
Right.
also has, placements in other astrological signs. So,
Right.
compatibility, I actually find it has more to do with the moon and Venus, because those tend to be the
Mhm.
relational planets
Mhm.
more than
Mhm.
sun sign. But when you do see those sun sign compatibility charts, that's usually where they're getting it from. Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
my
rising
my
sign
moon and
control.
My moon and Venus are very different because my moon is Cancer and my Venus is Capricorn. That's a great sign to have in Venus. You really want that energy, let me tell you. I'm being very sarcastic. It's tricky.
Well, and every placement, honestly has its own, exactly like you were saying, Christy, kind of like its positive manifestations and its more shadowy manifestations.
Right.
There are some placements that are viewed as good, right? Like this is a good placement. But the truth is, there absolutely can be too much of a good thing. And for example, maybe someone has beautiful, nurturing Venus in Cancer. But then maybe they kind of don't set boundaries and let people walk all over them. Venus in Capricorn is going to set boundaries. Now are boundaries the sexiest, most romantic thing to do all the time? Probably not, but they really are beneficial for long-term relationships. And if you think about Capricorn, earth sign, and it's a cardinal sign, so it's that creation energy. You're creating something that will last.
Yes.
With that Capricorn, cardinal earth. And in fact, that's so much of the Capricorn archetypal energy is kind of like, I'm going to put in the time, the discipline, the work to build something that will last.
Right.
And Ben had a really good question too. Why are the elements broken up? Wouldn't it be nicer to keep the fire together? One of those fires is going to be creative, one the maintainer, and one the death. Yeah, that's exactly right, Ben. And they could have structured it in this way where all the fire signs are together, Aries and then Leo and then Sagittarius, and do that with all of the signs. But that doesn't actually reflect our year. Like if you take Aries, start of spring, and Leo is the next season, the fire would only build as that season went on. You would take fire, the next season would be fire, so you would be dumping even more fire onto it. The last season would be fire, so you would be dumping even more onto it. And then you would immediately switch to I don't know what would be next in that case. Maybe water, maybe Cancer. And then you would do the three water signs. But they were really trying to reflect our world. And if you kind of take like what will if we take kind of the first three, Aries and then Taurus and then Gemini, if we take fire, and Aries is kind of this undirected, uncontrolled, like motivated, we're going to just do it, we're going to get started, we're going to think about the consequences later, much later. If we take that energy, that is the energy we need to start spring. For plants to be like, I am going to bud, and for lambs to be like, we are going to have baby lambs. We need that kind of like initiatory energy. But then, our world doesn't become a crazy place where flowers bloom, forever. And we need that to be balanced out with some other elements. And so then we get Taurus season. Taurus is when, okay, things have started budding. Now we're in more of a preserving mode. We're not having more baby lambs born. Like the sheep are taking care of the lambs that have already been born by giving them milk, by giving them food. That's kind of that earthy, sustaining part. So each one of the seasons, it would be more convenient, like from a calendar perspective, to say all of the fire stuff, then all of the water stuff. But what the ancient people were specifically trying to do was kind of describe this spinning up, maintaining, and spinning down that they saw in the seasons. And so they felt like they saw fire, with the budding and blooming of everything in the spring. And then they saw an earthiness where, okay, that spring has sprung, and now we're kind of maintaining this and keeping everything that was born alive. So there's this sense of they were trying to describe something rather than create a nice logical system, for us to follow.
Right.
But that's a great question. Ben
has great questions.
He's great questions.
Very, very like neuroscience-y, logically minded, so I can appreciate that. So now, so that's cardinal. So the next would be fixed. So what
Yes.
is this fixed energy? Because I always imagine when I describe fixed energy to people, I'm like, it's an oak tree. It's like stuck, doesn't really move. And so, but expand on that, because I'm sure that's like this much of a picture that's this big.
Absolutely. And so the first thing, when we're talking about the fixed signs, remember that the start of every
Mhm,
season, it's
mhm,
a boundary between a
mhm.
mutable destroyer sign and a cardinal creating sign. So I'm going to pause for a
Okay.
second and see if people kind of get that. Like we have Pisces, a mutable destroying sign. We have
Mhm.
Aries, a creating cardinal sign. That boundary between them is the start of spring. That is the spring equinox. So every single mutable sign and
Mhm.
cardinal sign, the boundary between them is either a solstice or an equinox. So then the
Okay.
question is, what about the fixed signs? They don't get any boundaries. They don't get any special festivals, or they're stuck in the
Right?
middle. They don't get any solstice celebrations or,
We don't get
equinox celebrations. But, actually, they do in a lot of
it.
cultures. Like if anyone is familiar with the cross quarter days, which if we have any kind of witchy people here, maybe we do, maybe
Mhm,
not. Um,
mhm,
Certainly, like the Celtic tradition, for
mhm,
example, celebrated not just the equinoxes and the solstices, but also
mhm,
the cross quarter days, which are
mhm,
midway between the equinoxes
mhm,
and the solstices. So,
mhm, mhm.
in the Celtic
So,
tradition, that's Imbolc,
mhm,
Beltane, Lunasa,
mhm, mhm.
Samhain, which is also Halloween.
Right.
If people are familiar with
Mabon.
those, Mabon, yes.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
those take place in exactly the middle of each fixed sign.
Okay.
So if we take our wheel way back to our old wheel that we divided into 4 quarters, and we said,
Mhm,
okay, each one of those 4 quarter points marks the
mhm,
boundary between a creator and destroyer sign. Now, if
mhm,
we divide each one of those quarters in half, those
mhm,
what are called the cross quarter days, those are
mhm,
all in the middle of the fixed signs.
mhm. Mm.
So in the middle of Taurus season, which is around, gosh, I'm trying to think. It's not quite May 1st, but if
Mhm,
anyone's heard of like May Day and May 1st,
mhm,
that was
mhm.
kind of the cross quarter celebration day. Yeah,
Right.
Halloween is that for the
Uh-huh.
fall. Um, those cross quarter days are right in the middle of the fixed signs. And those were celebrated not as a change of seasons, the way the
Mhm,
equinoxes and solstices were, but
mhm.
we are in the fullness of this
Yes.
season. This
Mhm,
spring is as springy as it's going to
mhm,
get. This
mhm,
summer
mhm.
is as summery as it's going to get. So the
Right.
fixed
Right.
signs represent the fullness. Um,
Mhm.
we've been using the word archetype a lot. I've been using the word archetype a lot, but
Uh-huh.
kind of that archetypal energy of the season happens during that fixed time frame. So there's a lot that's really, um, and maybe after we talk about cardinal, fixed, and mutable, we'll go back and talk
Mhm.
about how these apply to people and your
Yeah.
temperament and your astrology chart, because that is its whole own thing. Um,
Right.
Fixed energy is very pure. And I don't
Mhm.
mean pure in a good way, like impure is bad and pure is good. I
Mhm.
mean pure in that it is like there's one ingredient. It's
Mm.
like this is not a mix of things. It's a pure thing. There's only one thing in it, and it is spring or it is summer. Whereas when we have the creation energy, there's still some of the energy of the previous season because it's trying to spin up a new thing, and it can't do that instantly. And with the
Okay.
mutable destroyer signs, there's that energy of, okay, yeah, we're still in this current season, but we're starting to see hints of the next season because we're spinning this one down. So those tend to feel more mixed. Whereas the fixed sign, if you want to know what fire just is, look at Leo, the fixed fire sign. If you want to know what air just is, look at Aquarius, the fixed air sign. It's really that completely pure energy of that sign. The flip side, very single focused, very archetypal. All of this sounds very cool. It is very cool. But the flip side to that is fixed sign. When you're in that fixed season, there really is a resistance to change, because those are the signs that in the parts of the season that don't really have to deal with change or anything very unexpected. They know what's coming. It's Taurus season, it's spring, it's February, it's Aquarius season. They know what to expect. And so there's a certain rigidity and lack of flexibility to the fixed signs because they're so archetypal. And so they're like, no, I don't want to inject any Aries into my thing. I am a Taurus, And so, there is that kind of certain rigidity. And you see that even in the archetypes for the, for each of the fixed signs, like Taurus, the bull, that sign has a reputation for stubbornness. Right. And Leo, the next fixed sign, fixed fire, has kind of a reputation for more, focus on self to the exclusion of others, and not being very rigid in sharing the spotlight, kind of wanting the whole spotlight for themselves. Obviously, these are broad archetypes. Nobody get mad if you're a Leo or a Taurus. I'm a Taurus. So, but yeah, there's kind of that, you see that play out in the archetypes for the signs as well. And again, this is where, if you understand the elements and you understand that cardinal fixed mutable energy, you don't have to memorize the zodiac signs and memorize a bunch of keywords for them. You start to understand, what does it look like when fire is inflexible? You get Leo. That's what it looks like, So, yeah.
And what about Aquarius? What about Aquarius for those? I mean, I know how it feels for me, but what does that look like?
Because all of the air signs are very people oriented. The air signs, we talked about a little bit when we talked about Gemini season, but they're very intellectual signs. And we see that in their representations in the zodiac. We have Gemini, the twins, people, Aquarius, the water bearer, a person, Libra, the scales. Animals don't use scales. Plants don't use scales. Only humans have kind of devised these justice systems where we have a sense of fairness and scales. So the air signs are human signs. They kind of represent the intellect and logic that our brains are able to do, that no other creature on the planet has this ability. It's a blessing and a curse, but no other animal does this. And so if we look at Aquarius, kind of that fixed human energy, we get the person who has a cause and will not give it up. Will not listen to the other side, is pretty confident, like, this is the way society should be. Why can't society be this way? Why can't this be fair? Why is this not fair? I hate that this isn't fair. It's that kind of energy where you're trying to kind of bring that rigidity to human processes, human societies, human justice systems.
Can end up a little Sheldon Cooper, it can be a little like, no, it's this. I don't care what you say, it's this. And if you guys have ever seen me get very passionate about something, and it typically is around some sort of justice and injustice, you're going to see me fire up more about that than you are, really anything. I mean, I can be stubborn, but I don't really get stubborn. I get fired up about the injustice of it. So, yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
And I have a couple of close friends who are Scorpios, since that's the one we didn't talk about so far. And
right.
they are so fixed in their emotions.
Mm,
They are the people who are going to be like, don't tell me how I feel. I know how I feel. I feel this
mhm,
way, and I refuse to feel any other way. I don't care
mhm,
what you tell me.
mhm,
I don't care if you tell me, oh, no, you should be happy. I don't feel happy. So
right.
again, it's that fixed rigidity of that
Yeah.
element. Uh,
And when you
yeah.
have two people that are fixed, like my husband and I, we're both fixed signs, Aries, or no, I lied, scratch that, Aquarius and Scorpio, and we're both the oldest, y'all, it really can come to some things. So that's where that healed, healthy side of you is like, okay, you just you go over there, I'm going to go over here, we're going to come back. So again, I like to point that out too, because really traditionally, if you look at it, Aquarius and Scorpio are not compatible signs. A lot of people who know enough to know will be like, oh, how's that work for y'all? But it works really well, because we have other things in our chart, first of all, but also just on that most basic level, we've healed a little bit of ourselves enough to kind of understand that. So
And I think
yeah,
what
and
you have too, with Christy, if you're kind of a fixed sign and you are with someone who's a fixed sign, and of course, like you said, there's other stuff going on in both of your charts, but
right,
at least you're not going to wind up with the dynamic of one person totally walking all over the other person.
yeah,
It's sort of like,
mm-hmm.
you'll both be fixed and rigid, which
Mm-hmm.
can feel frustrating because it's like, oh, this argument is never going to end because nobody's going to give in. But on the other
Right.
hand, it does tend to lead to a healthier, like
Yeah,
more equal dynamic than if you've
yeah,
got one person who has that stubbornness, is not going to give
mm-hmm.
in, and then another person who's maybe a mutable sign like Pisces who gives in
Mm-hmm.
too often. And then
Right,
it's an unequal, so some of
yeah,
this, I think that the whole astrological compatibility study,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's called synastry. If you actually do the full way with the full charts instead of just the sun signs, it is fascinating, so fascinating. But
Uh-huh.
it's there's never a binary answer to will these two charts be compatible, because
Mm-hmm.
any relationship ever and any
Mm-hmm.
two charts you look at ever are going to have some things that just don't play nice.
Right,
Maybe your Venuses
right,
play really well together, but your Jupiters don't. Or,
right.
there's always going to be something in the chart. There are going to be some things that are amazing, other things that
Mm-hmm.
are not so fun. And so
Mm-hmm.
much of it is like, as a human, each
Right.
one of us has to decide, what are my non-negotiables?
Yeah.
Like if fairness is really, really important to you, you might
Mhm.
want to be with someone who has quite a bit of Libra in their chart, even if, compatibility speaking says that's not as important. If you
Right.
want someone who's really dependable, maybe you want some Taurus, someone with
Mhm.
Taurus prominent in their
Mhm.
chart. If you want someone
Mhm.
who's really exciting and spontaneous, and that's important to you in your relationship, Aries, Sagittarius, so
Right.
it's almost
Right.
like, there are going to be some things that feel like they work really well, other things that they don't.
Yeah.
As humans, it's up to us to say, what is most important to me in a relationship?
Right.
And it's not the
Right.
same for everyone. Some people want stability, some people want
Mhm.
passion, some people want
Mhm.
emotional, relation. Everybody
Mhm.
kind of has their own prioritized list.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's
And
important too to say, just because your chart might not at the start of it look like it's going to work, don't discount that. I
yeah,
mean, there are, so it's, um, it's kind of fun to be like, oh, what's your sign? What's this? But don't just be like if I looked at my husband, I was like, you're a Scorpio, you're a toxic hot mess. It's been nice. We'll see ya.
right.
And I love Scorpios. I'm surrounded by them. They find me. I don't know why,
Same.
but you all find me. And I joke around with them. I'm like, you little Scorpio, you know, and of course, all of my friends know I love them dearly and I'm just picking on them, but I'm like, where do you come from? But again, you know, there's that. So I don't want anybody out there to be so rigid about something that you're like, oh, Karina and Christy said right here. And no, you know, like, you know, let life.
Yeah.
Right. I
And I
think
think
that's
the
part of it.
other thing is any relationship any of us are in, and I won't take this too much further because I know this is not a talk about astrological relationships, maybe its own interesting talk at some point. But, you know, anytime we are in a relationship, we learn a lot about
Yeah.
ourselves and about how to relate to people. And, you know, when you are in a marriage or some more committed relationship, there are
Mm-hmm.
compromises. You are learning
Mm-hmm.
new ways to relate, new love languages that maybe weren't native
Mm-hmm.
to you. And
Mm-hmm.
the goal, hopefully, for most of us,
Mm-hmm.
if we're trying to kind of raise our vibration, learn, experience, you know, help our souls grow,
Mm-hmm.
become better, more well-rounded people, the goal probably isn't to just find someone who's uber easy, who never
Yeah.
expects anything from us, never challenges us. So it's
Right.
almost like, you know, some of the charts that traditionally might be like, oh, not a bad, you know, not a good
Mm-hmm.
pairing, there's going to be difficulties
Mm-hmm.
there. We all learn
Mm-hmm.
a lot through difficulties. As a matter of fact, if
Yeah.
we all look back on our lives collectively, probably
Mm-hmm.
some of the times where we grew the most were the most difficult. Now, I am not saying go out and find someone whose chart is the least like yours as
Right,
possible.
right, right,
But,
right.
you know,
Don't go
again, there are
find you a
things,
narcissist.
right? Exactly. And they have those in all the signs. So you can't escape
Exactly.
those by doing an astrology.
Exactly.
There's shadow sides to all of the zodiac signs.
Right, right,
But
right.
yeah, there's so much to learn from any relationship. And so what
Mhm.
I love doing with astrology, and I have analyzed myself and my partner's chart extensively, of course.
Mhm.
But I try to use that as helpful tools to see where
Yes.
are we going to have problems, and to understand, oh, we're
Yeah.
arguing about this again. That sort of
Mhm.
tracks. You know, what can we
Right.
learn? How can we develop? Because we can see
Yeah.
this, we can see in the charts this is going to be a problem. We're seeing it play out in
Mhm.
real life. This is a problem.
Right, right, right.
All right, I'm getting off
And
the relationship soapbox. Do you
yeah,
have anything else
no,
to say about
no, no, no.
relationships?
It's and isn't it amazing how we come on and we're like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and we always inevitably end up because it's all interconnected, and you
It
can, it's kind
is,
of like you
yeah.
can't. It's not like we're talking about trees, and we're just going to talk about the oak tree. You know, what I'm making shit up here, people, but
Yeah.
you know, I mean, and you don't have to talk about all of the other trees. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about the oak tree, but we also kind of have to talk about the roots. And then we've got to talk about the leaves and the branches
Mhm.
and the watering system and the grass and the soil and the sun. And so it's all really connected in
Yeah.
this really that yes, Kenzie does seem a little squirrelish, but it makes sense. It makes sense. So
Yeah.
yes, so so we were on fixed. Were we done with fixed, or were and headed on to
We are, yeah,
mutable?
we are moving on
Okay.
to mutable, and then we can take a little bit of time to talk about what this, you know, how we look at our chart
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
this, and how we understand
Yeah.
ourselves and family and friends better as a result of this. So mutable, um, the older word that was used
Hmm.
instead of mutable was called double-bodied. And I've always thought that was such an interest. When I first heard that, I was like, I don't know, that doesn't even make any sense. But the
Hmm.
more I sat with that, there really is a sense. Think about any time you have ended something in your life.
Hmm.
There, there's almost always sort of these two minds where on the one
Hmm.
hand, you're like, it is time. It is
Hmm.
time for this job to end, this
Hmm.
relationship to end. But on the other side, you're thinking about, but it's what I know. there were some good times. You're reminiscing
Mm-hmm.
about, the parts that did go well. And so there
Mm-hmm.
is almost this, all of the mutable signs have a little bit of a um, double-minded, double-bodied nature of,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we are spinning this down. We are in the process of deconstructing this. That is a thing. But also, wasn't that kind of a cool thing? Weren't there
Mm-hmm.
some good parts of that thing?
Right.
And there's that sense of, whenever we're like if you're going through your house throwing things out, there's that sense when you pick something up and you're like, yeah, I can throw it away. And then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, but I wore this shirt on this first date like 5 years ago. Do I want to throw it out? And it's that the mutable energy is that energy. It's not an emotionless, like, okay, out with the old and in with the new. It really is this
Mm-hmm.
energy of like, yes, we are destroying, but we have so much
Mm-hmm.
compassion for what came before. And we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
trying to pull the good parts out of that and see if there's a
Right.
way to weave them into the new.
Right.
And so you
Right.
typically have, so our four mutable signs are Gemini and Virgo. And I love that I'm doing this on the fly. I could have written this down and probably made things a lot easier for myself. And Sagittarius and Pisces. There we go. Made it. And what's interesting about those four signs, well, there's multiple things. But all of them have this aspect of duality. So we think about
Mm-hmm.
Gemini, it's the twins.
Mm-hmm.
There's two of them. We think about Pisces, it's the two fish that are kind of,
Mm-hmm.
circling head to tail. We
Mm-hmm.
think about Sagittarius. Sagittarius, I don't know if people know, but it's the centaur, who has
Mm-hmm.
the body of a
Mm-hmm.
horse and the torso of a human.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this kind of duality of like two creatures almost kind of merged into one.
Right.
And then we have Virgo, which is kind of this dichotomy because, it's Virgo, the virgin, the
Mm-hmm.
purity of that. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, um, there's sort of that question of, is is the purity going to stay? Is this going to take a different direction? um, you know,
Right. Right. Right.
Many people do not stay virgins forever. So
Right.
it kind of has this, okay, there is the virgin. There's also, life after the virgin.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the mutable signs kind of have this sense of there's sort of two things going on here,
Mm-hmm.
two ideas to be considered. In some cases, like with the two fish or the two humans with Gemini, there even are two physical things that are part of the
Right.
symbolism there. But again, there's kind of that, we're spinning things down, but
Mm-hmm.
we are aware of where we're coming from, and we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
incorporating those roots into what's coming next. And so the
Oh.
mutable signs tend to feel the least concrete. With the cardinal signs, they're coming
Mm-hmm.
in hot. One
Right.
thing that one of my astrology teachers said for Aries is ready, fire, aim. So
Mm.
you fire first, and
Yeah.
then afterwards you're like, maybe I should have aimed that. I don't even, like Aries comes in hot. All of those cardinal signs, they're like,
Right.
okay, it's a new season. I'm taking over now. I'm creating something. Stand out of my
Mm-hmm.
way. Whereas
Right.
the
Right.
mutable signs are really where you see a lot of that um, ambiguity, where it's like, yeah, excited for what's new, but also
Mm-hmm.
sad for what we're losing. Um, so yeah, all of those four signs, there tends to be, and if you know people who have strong Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces
Mm-hmm.
placements,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's sort of hard to nail them down.
Yeah.
There's less conviction there. I would
Mm-hmm.
say of those
Mm-hmm.
four, Virgo probably has the most conviction because it's the earth sign.
Right.
It's the
Right.
mutable earth, so it's more grounded. So Virgo often, there might be like, this is the perfect way. I just have to get there, but I know
Right.
what I want it to
Right.
look like. I know what I want perfection to be
Right.
like. But generally, it's like, yeah, there's this sense, Pisces is classic. This,
Mhm.
all of the books you read or articles you look at with Pisces, it's kind of like, yeah, kind of flowy, doesn't really commit to things. They're
Mhm.
almost living in a dream world, in a,
Mhm.
they've got more spiritual awareness. They're not concerned with nailing things down and being concrete about things on the physical earth.
Right.
So all of those
Right.
mutable signs, there's a lack of definition and a lack of
Mhm.
conviction. Um, and I don't mean that in either a good or a bad way. I feel like the
Right.
word conviction, some people assign either a positive or negative moral quality to
Mhm.
it, but this is more
Right.
just, they don't feel the need to sort
Mhm.
of say, yes, this was a good thing, this is a bad thing. They're really
Mhm.
sorting through what was good from the last season and what's going to be good about this upcoming season.
Right.
So there's just an inherent duality. And many of the people I know who have those strong mutable placements, it's hard for them to even know what they want, because there is this sense of, today I wake up and I want this, but there's another part of me that wants this. I don't really want the
Mhm.
traditional life, but I don't know. There's a part underneath me that maybe does want the traditional life. And so it
Yeah.
tends to be really hard, even for themselves,
Mhm.
to kind
Mhm.
of um, determine, what do I want? Because they're so good at kind of seeing where they're coming from and where they're going to. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's something really interesting about that changeability um, of, yeah, the mutable signs.
Yeah. And
Oh, Ben's looking up terms. I
I
love it. Liable to change.
and
Ben
you
Buffy knows.
you think about it again when you think of people that who are Pisces, they really are. It is kind of hard. They're like, I mean, if I'm able, if I get there, okay. And if not, that's okay too, I mean, and
Yeah.
again, everything is, there is a very healthy quality to it. And then there can be that kind of more unhealthy. I like to think of it more as unhealed. I don't really like to call it
Yeah.
unhealthy, but that kind of unhealed
Yeah.
side. And we all have those sides to us too. But I think we can all look at people and just kind of go, oh, this makes so much sense. And I wanted to say too, if any of you are interested, we were talking about like Lunasa, Mabon, Beltane,
Mm.
all of
Mm.
them. Those are called Sabbats. And you can get a book called The Witch's Wheel of the Year. And what it does is it's a circular thing and it breaks down exactly where each one falls, how you can celebrate it, what it's for. There are some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful one. Of course, Samhain is like Halloween. Yule is more like Christmas. Mabon is kind of like May Day, and then Beltane is like right in there before Yule, right? Isn't it kind of toward that?
Beltane, I think, is actually the May
Is
Day
it?
one.
Oh, did I get them switched
And
around?
Mabon, yeah, and I think it's opposite. But yeah, basically,
Opposite.
all of the concepts you're talking
But
about are right on.
yeah, and so if you're interested, that's a great book to pick up. If you can find it, you can find it. I usually go to a metaphysical shop for my stuff, but you can probably find it on Amazon. You could probably find it in a bookshop. There's some really beautiful books out there that tell you all about creating an altar, rituals you can do. They break it all down as to who believed what and how that represented. So if this is something that you want to go further with in that, I thought I would mention that. Um, and so, and definitely wanted to talk about traits of all of these, but Ben has the question: is there any place where crystals feed into the zodiac? Ben has been on a crystal mission. So
Oh, that. I love
he's
that so
got,
much.
yeah, he's got some good stuff going on. So the short answer is yes,
Is
but
he asking me though, or is he asking Kenzie? Because I don't know if maybe Kenzie has quite a bit
well,
of crystal
I,
knowledge too.
I
It's
think if
so,
you have some insight to it, go ahead and add what you got. I gave him my little bit, so you can
okay.
add to that and then get ready with your notes.
So the short answer is absolutely. The longer answer is uh, almost every culture associates different stones with different seasons and times of year. Even in the US with this culture, we see that, there are birthstones for each month.
Mhm,
Like March is aquamarine, I think May is emerald. Um,
mhm,
and of course, the Gregorian calendar months do not line up with zodiac seasons, but that's just to sort of illustrate that this idea of associating crystals and gems with
mhm,
specific times of year is a very,
mhm,
very cross-cultural idea. Um,
mhm.
um, okay, so that's the short answer. The slightly longer answer, and I won't go into a rabbit trail. I feel like I go into rabbit trails on any or all of this. The
No, you're
slightly
good.
longer answer is um, different cultures and different subgroups had different associations. So
Mhm.
it's not as simple as this is the stone of Sagittarius, this is
Right.
the stone of Cancer. It is not that simple. There
Right.
are some cultures that have a more unbroken tradition that are closer to unification. Like I'm thinking of Jyotish astrology in India. They really have had an unbroken tradition since prehistory. And a lot of that is because Christianity never really made it there in a big way.
Mhm, mhm,
And Christianity kind of stamped out a lot of the astrological practices in Europe
mhm,
and some of the Middle East. Um, so, yeah, our Western astrology tradition is a little bit more fragmented, but there
mhm,
are some amazing books of correspondences you can get that will show you some of the different. I don't want to say possibilities exactly, but
mhm,
some of the ways crystals, colors, numbers, birds, anything you can
mhm,
imagine have been associated with different zodiac signs.
mhm.
There's a wonderful book. Uh, it's written by somebody Skinner, Stephen Skinner, maybe. Anyway, his
Mhm.
last name is Skinner, and his book is called The Magician's Tables.
Uh-huh.
And the whole book is just a book about correspondences. And like, these things have historically been considered as similar and resonant. So the idea would be if you are a magician, if you're trying to create
Mhm,
talismans or, you know,
mhm,
um, whatever,
mhm,
things for your rituals, you would
mhm.
kind of go to this book of magician's tables and say, what am I trying to manifest? What kind of energy am I trying? Yeah, there we go. It was Stephen Skinner. That is crazy that I remembered that. Um, yeah, and you could basically say, oh, if I'm doing work at this time of year during this
Mhm,
zodiac season for this purpose,
mhm.
here are the colors, the gemstones, the numbers,
Yeah,
that should kind of be part of my ritual.
yeah.
So that's
And
fascinating.
and that's kind of, oh, you guys. Sorry, you
Yes,
don't want to
thank
hear me yell
you.
at the dogs. Yeah, you can tell when plant shows up. All of a sudden, things start popping up everywhere.
Things
It's
get
amazing.
beefier, yes.
When it's just me, like you may or may not get some random ass countdown in the middle of your show.
I
Um,
loved that last time.
that was great.
I know we're running out of time. I did want to talk really quickly though, just about what people
Yeah.
can do with this as
Yes.
they look
Yes.
at their
Yes.
charts.
Yes.
Because I feel like this has all been incredibly interesting from a
Yeah.
historical seasons,
Oh, yeah.
ancient people's
Right.
perspective, but we all live in the modern day and have modern charts.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if you have a copy of your chart, which there's a
Mhm,
bunch of free software, you can go to astro.com. There's a bunch of free software where you
mhm,
can calculate your chart. If you don't
mhm,
want to do that, at least if you know your sun, moon, and rising, you can kind of figure out,
mhm,
do I have more mutable, fixed,
mhm,
or cardinal? What energy do
mhm,
I have the most of?
mhm,
Um, And from there, you can look at, this tends to be how I approach things. So for
Mhm.
example, if your sun is in a fixed sign, the sun
Mhm.
really represents our sense of self, our sense of
Mhm.
purpose in this life. There's going to be
Mhm.
this sense of that will feel very fixed to us, not
Right.
open for debate. Nobody is going to convince me that this is not my purpose. Nobody is going to convince me I should be off doing something else. There will be a
Mhm.
fixed nature in the way we
Mhm.
approach our purpose, our sense of
Mhm.
self, our authenticity.
Mhm.
If our
Mhm.
fixed, if our moon is in a fixed sign,
Mhm.
what satisfies our soul is going to
Mhm.
feel more fixed. So it might
Mhm.
be that there's something completely random and not logical, like maybe when before we go to bed, we have to put a feather on our nightstand. And
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
no rhyme or reason to it, but it just makes us feel good. And we
Uh-huh.
don't care how many people tell us it's stupid to put a feather next to our nightstand when we go to bed. That feels resonant with our soul and feels important
Right.
to us, and that is going to feel fixed.
Right.
And if
Right.
our rising sign is fixed, our rising, there's of course more to it than this, but it really kind
Mhm.
of, if we boil it down, is about the way we approach the world, the way we appear
Mhm.
to the world. So people with fixed rising signs tend to appear inflexible to people and appear
Mm.
like, they don't want to compromise as much.
Right.
Even though sometimes if their sun and moon are not in fixed signs, that's not true. That may be some
Mhm.
kind of mask or defense mechanism or something that they put up for the world, but they will appear that way.
Mhm.
Likewise, if your sun is in a cardinal sign, you are
Mhm.
not going to be content to sit and wait for your life purpose to come to you. You are going to be on that path, going after it, 100%
Right.
engaged. You
Right.
may fall off the path 8 times, but you just get back up and keep going because you
Mhm.
would rather do anything rather than wait around for
Right.
your life purpose to show itself. If your moon is in a cardinal sign, there's something that is cathartic to you about starting something, moving something forward. So for example, if you're feeling maybe kind of anxious, if you're feeling kind of down, it might feel very restorative to your soul to start a project.
Mhm.
Maybe start
Mhm.
like, Christy, you make those beautiful journals, maybe like start
Mhm.
a new journal. But there's the process of creating is
Mhm.
satisfying and helpful to your soul. And so you'll always be
Yeah.
kind of looking for that next creative project to start, that next creative outlet.
Mhm.
Yes,
Okay.
Aquarius is fixed. um, and the rising, then, if your rising is in a cardinal sign, you are going to be viewed by people as the person who's going to get the ball rolling. And these people tend to be, um, I don't want to say leaders exactly. They don't have to be the best leaders, but because
Mhm.
they're going to be the person who stands up first and says, "Hey, everybody, I think we should do this." You tend to see
Mhm.
them become managers and,
Mhm.
kind of leaders in organizations. When everybody's like, "Yeah, what does everybody think?" The
Mhm.
cardinal rising signs are going to be the ones who are
Mhm.
like, "Here's what I think." And so,
Right.
they're
Right.
viewed as being kind of the leaders in their groups and communities. Um, and then if you have a mutable sun sign, your life purpose is going to feel a little bit more vague. It won't feel
Mhm.
as simple as like, yes, this is what I'm doing. It'll feel a
Mhm.
little bit more, during different times of your life, different
Mhm.
years, different days even. You might
Mhm.
feel very different. Some days you might feel like, yes, this job is exactly what I'm meant to do. And other days you may be like, this job sucks. I must be meant to do something else. So there's that
Right.
kind of, again, always open-minded, not
Mhm.
feeling super concrete. Gemini is mutable, Shannon. If you have a mutable moon, you
Mhm.
tend to be a little bit more like your emotions change. You'll get tired of things more
Mhm.
often. Like maybe a ritual that was really restorative to you for like a year. After a year, you're like, I'm not really feeling it anymore. I'm ready for a new ritual. So
Right.
there's something about that always kind of, again, lack of conviction, lack of
Mhm.
rigidity. Like I did this for a while, I'm going to do this for a while.
Mhm. Right.
And then
Right.
if we have a um, mutable rising, as Shannon brought up, rising is Gemini, um, you're going to come across to people as more open-minded, more
Mhm.
flexible. And this is
Mhm.
really interesting because I know a few people who have a mutable rising and a fixed sun. And so they
Oh.
come across as like a little bit of a pushover, like you can argue them
Uh-huh.
into something, but that
Uh-huh.
fixed sun behind the scenes is like, no.
Right. Right.
So it's really interesting, but they will come across, they'll
Uh-huh.
kind of, "Oh, I'll have the discussion with you," "Yeah, we'll talk
Yeah.
about this," but there is
Mhm.
that fixed sun behind the scenes. But yeah, they will
Mhm.
come across typically the mutable rising signs, they are by far the most fun people to get in a debate with. Because if you get in a debate with a fixed sign rising, you're
Uh-huh.
probably going to feel like I'm not getting anywhere in this conversation. I'm not convincing anybody of anything. Whereas with the
Right.
mutable, you may or may not be actually convincing them of something, but you will feel like you are. So it
Right.
feels a
Right.
little more fun. The mutable signs, Shannon, are oh, here I get my test again. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces.
Is that
Fixed
gullible?
sun rising, moon cardinal. Yeah. I wouldn't say that. Again, some of this comes back to, it's also, I'm kind of giving brief descriptions for these, like, yeah, with
Mhm.
a mutable rising sign, you'll come across as more open-minded. But
Right.
part of that also depends on the person on the other side of that debate. Like
Yes.
Scorpios, for example, they're so deep, they're so intense.
Mhm.
You're typically not going to
Mhm.
fool a Scorpio, but they will often see through your rising sign to exactly what
Yes.
sun and moon are behind that. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
again, it's really interesting. There are kind of some broad generalizations, but whenever you have two people relating
Mhm.
to each other in some way, there's
Mhm.
two charts to consider.
Right. Right. Right.
Shannon, that's interesting. Sun, rising, and moon all mutable. And that tends to be unusual. Of course, it's not unheard of, but just
Mhm.
statistically, it's not
Mhm.
very likely to have all three in one
Mhm.
mode.
Well, and
So
I'm
we
not.
appreciate your open-mindedness, Shannon.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I was going to say, if you guys are looking
Flexibility.
for someone to do your chart, Karina is amazing. Make an appointment with her.
Mhm.
She can go over all of this with you because you guys, she did my chart and she's like, okay. And we just went through, I still have that notebook. I still have all those notes
Mm.
from everything. And what I remember was she was like, your chart is very balanced. And I was like, oh, look at me being all balanced up in here. Well, if you know me, maybe my chart's balanced, but there's a little bit of question there sometimes.
Well, and
But
this is also the thing too, Christy, where the lived experience of being
yeah,
balanced is typically not being at the exact center of everything in a
right,
zen-like state. It's actually
right,
feeling the different pulls, where some
yeah,
some days you wake up and you're swordsy, as you say.
mm-hmm,
Other days you might
yeah,
wake up and you're feeling more of the watery emotional Cancer.
yeah,
We are
yeah,
all just human. Shannon, we
right,
are all a mess.
yes,
And
yes,
we're all just kind of trying to live out all of these energies, these elements, these modes, our charts in
yes,
the best ways we can and learn and
mm-hmm.
grow as part of the process. So a balanced chart
Uh-huh.
typically actually is a little bit harder to integrate
Mm-hmm.
because if you are
Mm-hmm.
all water, for example,
Yeah,
fire just isn't part of your life. You don't really have to worry about
right.
it. Whereas if you have all of the elements and all of the
Uh-huh.
planets are kind of evenly distributed around your chart, there's a lot more things kind of pulling at each other, and
Yeah.
what water is, and what fire is, and what air
Mm-hmm.
is, but do you have them all perfectly balanced every moment? Of
Right.
course not.
Right. No,
because
not
you're not fully transcended yet. We're all waiting for that moment,
right.
Christy. You fully
Working to
transcend.
get there. I tell you, I'm like that meme where, like my guardian angel are like, God, she's up. She's up. Did I breathe? I said, I'm like that meme where they're like, she's up. Oh my gosh. And I pick on myself because I know how that is. And it is. You can see a lot of all of the sides of everything. And that can be a blessing and a curse, right? Um, Karina, thank you so much for all of your insight. I want to really encourage you guys. Um, check out Karina's website. I'm going to have you give all that information where we can find you here in a minute. Reach out to her, truly. If you want to truly understand your chart, if you want to truly understand where you are at, this is a great point. But honestly, sitting down and having that real conversation with Karina about your chart where you can ask those questions, if you do that, I promise that when you come to these things, you are going to start seeing those points and you're going to be like, that's it. I understand it. That's good. If not, there's a lot of places to do your chart and you can bring, and every time we do this, bring your chart, bring your notebook, look it up, be like, okay, what is my blah, blah, blah. And, but I want to encourage you, you guys treat yourself to a session with Karina. It is going to be worth it. I promise. So on that note,
That's
Karina,
so
tell us
kind.
where we can find you so we can continue to follow you and learn.
Oh. Yeah, so on YouTube, I am Magic of the Moon Astrology, all one word. My website is also magicofthemoonastrology.com. And if you sign up for the email list there, I send out periodic, articles and some astro weather for what's coming up. So that can also be helpful, totally free. Yeah, and I would say, from this mode conversation we've had today with cardinal, fixed, and mutable. If you don't take anything else away from today, take away the living in tune with the seasons. It's so hard in our modern world because we have, air conditioning and we can get an orange all year and everything.
Right.
But there is something so incredibly valuable living more at one with nature.
Yeah.
And so many of the astrological archetypes, and it all starts to make more sense when you go outside on the first day after summer solstice, first day of Cancer season, and you look around and you're just like, how does the world feel right now? So,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's just such a shortcut to understand the elements, fire, air, earth, and water, and to understand the modes, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. It's such an astrology shortcut, because then you don't have to memorize 12 sets of everything. You can really just kind of relate things to like, yeah, what would mutable water look like? And start to kind of build your own mental model of the archetypes. This was how, ancient people started astrology. They didn't start with a little cookbook of like, here's what Sagittarius means. They were building these off of patterns they saw in nature.
Yeah.
And I got such a kick out of it in the very beginning of this conversation, Christy, because I gave examples from nature as a Taurus, and you were like, I relate it to people I know, as an Aquarius. And I was like, that's about perfect. There we see the difference between earth and air.
Yes. And again, and that's why I do relate, because if somebody's like, I'm a Taurus, then I think, oh, okay, that's going to look a little like Karina. Or, if they're an Aquarius, I'm like, oh, okay, that's going to look a little like me. And it does help. It really does help. Well, Karina, thank you as always. You always bring so much wisdom and insight and joy.
Oh, this is such a beautiful group.
Yes, it really is. I'm going to have Stasia take us out. Karina, stick around for a second, and we will see you all on the next one. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you for the wonderful questions.
Yes.